Hi there, everyone. My name is Forrest, and I'm going to be your instructor here today for a new series that we're kicking off, System Hardening for Beginners. The intent of this series is to provide, as it sounds, a launching pad for anyone, be it a technical user or a non technical user, to start figuring out how they can harden their system, and not only that, what it means, because what exactly does system hardening mean? It's a little bit different to everybody, after all. And we're going to go into depth about what this means and what we're going to be scoping in on for this course. Now, the key emphasis on this is that this course is going to be a 5 module and 4 lab work. Yes, we're giving you labs to be able to conduct through VirtualBox, as well as some challenges. None of these are required. You're not going to be graded on them. This is for your own experience, just to be able to get a bit more familiar, so that way you don't go ahead and potentially mess up any actual settings on your main machine. The main purpose as well of this course is this is a cybersecurity course, again, at a beginner level, for Alphagrad, the Discord community that's focused on really helping out with IT based learning. Alphagrad has been amazing to me. I've worked with many of the administrators there, and they have all been great individuals. And I wanted to go ahead and give back. So, whenever I approached them with this, I was so elated that they went ahead and agreed. Now, as well, for full transparency, making a course and giving back to the community is one of the requirements for a candidacy program that I'm involved in. We'll go into that in just a moment here. So, what you might already be thinking, why do you care or even think that this guy with a mustache and a hat is anywhere near credible, and why should you listen to them, right? So, let's talk a little bit about myself. And as you can see, this guy right down here, that's me whenever I'm actually posing for a photo. Now, who am I? Again, I'm Forrest. I have my master's in cybersecurity. I'm actually getting my doctoral of science in cybersecurity, and that is what I need to go ahead and have my candidacy for. And as well, I've worked in the field of cybersecurity now for a few years, both as an individual contributor and a leadership. What that essentially means is I've worked as a security administrator, a security analyst, an incident responder, a security engineer, and ultimately as well in leadership roles such as manager, senior manager of security programs here. I've been fortunate enough to be able to really see some individuals' careers grow, and I've also been fortunate enough to be able to flesh out programs and functions such as a security operations center, incident response, and now into security engineering. It's definitely one of the most fun aspects on it, so I get to be a bit of both strategic and as well technical at the same time. But the main thing is, you're not here to know all about me. I could talk about myself for hours, right? I'm sure many of you can see that I don't like to shut up. But the main idea is to teach you a bit about system hardening. So let's go ahead and move on to that. Alright, so once again, this series is called System Hardening for Beginners. We're going to be dealing with a few different subjects here that are pretty prominent throughout the cybersecurity or IT related spheres, both useful for your personal at home devices, your at home networks, and what have you, and as well if you're thinking of pursuing a career in technology. It's very beneficial as well to have a base level idea of some of these systems, as well as having a bit of a lab environment. Can't encourage VirtualBox more than enough. It's phenomenal. It lets you emulate, so creating a virtual machine on your computer that essentially means that you don't have to mess with your own computer to figure out all the fun. All right, so diving into this specifically, so system hardening has a lot of different definitions, right? So as you can see on this slide, we have a few different options what system hardening tends to look like. It can be operating system hardening, configuration or endpoint hardening, network hardening, server hardening, software application hardening, database hardening. There's a lot of different options that we could go ahead and do, right? However, for the purposes of this course, we're really going to be mostly speaking about operating system hardening and configuration slash endpoint hardening. We will have a few elements about server hardening and as well network hardening involved, but we won't be covering anything about software application hardening and database hardening. Again, the main purpose of this course is a beginner level course, right? If you're touching databases, if you're doing software application, even in some regards servers or even the network, right? You likely are not a beginner of technology. You probably have a bit more advance than most of the users that would be benefiting from this course. So we want to go ahead and really make sure we're just staying hyper focused here. So again, if you are wanting the software application hardening or the database hardening, I apologize. This course just unfortunately is not going to be for you. So let's talk a little bit about what is system hardening, right? And the unfortunate reality is, much like a lot of things in tech, there is no clear industry standard. A lot of vendors will use this same term of, we have the most hardened systems or this most hardened operating system. It's so secure, it's so awesome, yada, yada, yada. And that's a marketing thing, right? This allows for the vendors to say, well, we really are awesome with what we do, and we really understand everything about it, right? Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And even in some of the greater operating systems that many of us use, even if we're not in tech, such as Mac OS, better known as Apple devices, or if we're talking about Windows, there are some opportunities to further harden these. However, I do want to emphasize those vendors that I just mentioned, and specifically the operating systems, again, Mac OS and Windows, they have done great lengths to make sure that they have hardened systems and to ensure that they are doing the most due diligence and security out of the box on all of these. Again, though, there is no concise model that is driven by all members of technology, and there's not really even a consensus in small subsets such as information security that falls often into technology. As well, whenever we're talking about system hardening, it's important for us to remember that there are differences such as personal computing versus enterprise computing, right? What might work for your personal computer and your personal setup might not work in an enterprise based environment. It's very important to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Now, there also is this differences between virtualized machines or server assets, and it may or may not be leveraged. Again, you're going to be touching and working on virtual machines in the lab, actually. That is what we're going to have you set up on VirtualBox. And as well, regarding any of the operating systems, there are differences between what a Windows device does or a Mac device does, or even what a Unix, maybe you've heard of Linux or anything like that as a better way. They all have different features, different functionalities. They're all developed by different people, after all. With that, it also has further subsets. For instance, Windows does not just only make our, desktops and laptops. Microsoft, which is the vendor of Windows, also has servers. So these devices are specifically set up to be servers, and these operating systems are specifically set up to be servers. So there are specific subsets even in the same vendor, right? And we can see this mirrored even in Unix, aka that Linux there. There are differences of distributions. So you may have heard of Red Hat. If you like cybersecurity, you might have heard of Kali Linux. You might have been a Ubuntu Linux user, or even more obscure systems that are based on Linux, such as JBoss, right? All of these are going to have differing types of system hardening activities that can occur just based on the functionality, the setup of each operating system, and what its purpose is overall, right? Now, one other thing I do want to call out here is that middle tab, and there is, again, no clear consensus, right? Sometimes system hardening can mean physical, it can mean software, it can mean firmware. So we have to really be very zeroed in for the purposes of this course to really define this and run with that definition for right now. This isn't a debate about if one is better than the other or if one is more right than the other, what's more secure. This is just something to really make sure we're being scoped and being the most appropriate with the use of our time. So let's go ahead and move on here. So again, one thing that is important to know about system hardening, it does not mean that a system is going to be infallible, right? We can't ever go ahead and guarantee that there is 100% system security here. Unfortunately, bad actors, aka those hackers or anything else like that, there will still be exploits that they can use. And you can't harden against it, unfortunately. These are commonly referred to as 0 days or possibly unpatched vulnerabilities. And we'll talk about those in just a moment here. But it does not mean if you harden a system you are 100% secure. Unfortunately, there is no 100% secure solution in the world. But much like a house, we don't want to go ahead and just leave our front door open for anybody to come in, right? We want to provide that deterrent. We want to make it as difficult as possible. We want to say, you know what? If you're going to break into my house, quote unquote, you're going to have to really break the door down because I have a deadbolt. I have a one of those latching locks. I have the lock on the door hand knob there. And then I have my guard dog after there, right? Something like that. The biggest thing is that you want to make it difficult and you want to make it something that a bad actor, those hackers, right? They decide, we don't want to go in your house. We'll go ahead and tackle something else. And oftentimes, folks, it's not somebody sitting at a computer trying to go ahead and get into your computer, right? It's a program that that person made or even paid for. And in that, it also means that there is logic behind it and there's conditions behind it. Now, the introduction of machine learning and the introduction of artificial intelligence, those big scary buzzwords, right? It has made a little bit of a difference because it learns how to go ahead and adapt. However, whenever it's not a person trying to go ahead and do it, there are parameters that get placed, right? Just the very same if you and I go down to the supermarket and we're driving, right? There are parameters. Hey, what's going to be the fastest way? Well, we can take a left, then we can take a right, then we can take a left again. Or, we can take a right, we can take a left, we can take a right again. And that's the very same with a program. It's going ahead and checking those parameters and what makes sense. Maybe on the way in that example, right? We take a left, we take a right. Oh no, the road's closed. And then the parameter fails in that, right? And it has to move on to a different parameter if the code is good. But again, the main concept I want to emphasize, it's to provide as many deterrent controls to make a bad actor essentially avoid exploiting a system. And really, a proactive approach, right? And we've all heard this saying, is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to is now. And we always want to just keep on bettering ourselves. We want to be proactive about it. We want to harden our systems, not say, oh, well, I haven't so far, so I won't be attacked, right? So again, we want to just continue to enforce and continue to improve our security. Now, one thing I do want to emphasize here, we've talked a lot about these terms, exploit and vulnerability. And we haven't really described exactly what those mean, right? So, again, as the slide emphasizes, the primary purpose of doing the system hardening is really to anticipate and proactively remediate vulnerabilities. Now, a vulnerability is basically something a bad actor could exploit, right? It exists there, it hasn't been actively exploited though. That can be something as simple as you don't use a password on your account. That's a vulnerability, right? That doesn't mean that a bad actor is attacking your account. However, again, you probably should use a password on your accounts, but that's a vulnerability. However, an exploit, on the other hand, That's whenever a bad actor, using that example again of your account, that's whenever they go ahead and start logging into your information just because they know your username, right? Or maybe you set up a PIN instead of a password and they know that PIN. But again, it's an active taking advantage of the vulnerability. Key emphasis on that, especially for you cybersecurity or information security nerds. Vulnerability and an exploit, they don't mean the same thing. They're very closely related and they often get mixed up together. Now, as you can tell, I'm a fan of analogies, I'm a fan of real world examples. So, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to pull up a very short video here about a real world example. Now, in this real world example, you can see that this is McNally official. If you are a fan of TikTok or on TikTok rigorously, like my partner and I are, this individual, they are known for lockpicking. And they go ahead and really get challenged by even lockpicking or lock companies to say, hey, this is the most difficult lock that we've ever made. Go ahead and pick it. And again, the biggest thing is no lock is infallible. We're going to see how that plays out here in just a moment, so let me go ahead and play this video for us.
You're going to love this new design. Whereas other companies create high-quality products with innovative key systems in an effort to provide security, Masterlock has once again gone and done the expected. Instead, they have created this camouflage design that comes complete with the covering in an effort to hide their insecurity.
And so again, joking around aside and just frankly messing with Masterlock there. The key emphasis on that is that you have to really have the right deterrence. You saw how quickly that lock was picked there. In fact, I have a few locks here that I'll go ahead and show you in real time. I'm no McNally and I'm not going to be able to open an advanced lock like that, but I do want to just show you an example of it, right? So, let's go ahead and go on to the next slide here. All right, and so really, again, we have the examples of locks, padlocks here, locks with a number rotation on it, and we're going to be talking about, well, what exactly is the deterrent on it, right? On the left here, we have a very standard lock with a key on it. On the right, we have a combination-based lock that, let's just say for the sake of example, does not have a keyhole on it. Now, for the sake of hardening, we really have that advanced security from the combination-based lock. And the key reason behind why we have that added security is because the combination-based lock, it does not have that easy exfiltration or infiltration point of that keyhole, right? Don't get me wrong, it can absolutely still be cracked. If somebody wanted to go ahead and say, I'm going to sit here and brute force it, aka go through each of those possible combinations until they figure it out, they absolutely could. As well, most of these locks do have a physical failsafe, which allows a small little specialized tool made specifically for the lock to go ahead and be leveraged to break it open. That can be exploited. I apologize, by a bad actor. Likewise, frankly, folks, the end of the day is bolt cutters can be used on either of these. Again, nothing is infallible. However, one quick thing I do want to do before we move way too on from it is we're going to go ahead and just take a pause from the slideshow, the presentation from death, and really do a physical demonstration here. So, to my side here, I have a little training Amazon padlock sort of thing. And again, as you can see, can't open it, can't do anything on it. But the moment I put a key in it, cracks open, can spin it, do whatever. And again, moving my finger so you don't think there's anything going on, but moving around, no issue. I'll take the key out, and again, we can see, regardless of what I'm pulling on, and I'm sure if I pulled it hard enough, it's an Amazon lock after all. But that said, we're going to go ahead and pick this. So we're going to take this little tool here, just stick it in the keyhole, and we're going to take, oh gosh, um, let's see, we'll take a rake here, and we're going to go ahead and just spin it. So I don't know if you heard that, but essentially, again, just open it without the key. Um, just one more time because I know my fingers were in the way. I'm going to go ahead and get on in here, and this is a little difficult showing it on the camera, but we'll make it happen. And again, there we go. Now, one other thing I do want to emphasize, right? In this training set, they send over a few different locks. So you have the door lock and everything like that, and you have a double-sided lock and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go ahead and pick each of those and embarrass myself with my poor lock picking skills. But the key emphasis on it, each has a different layer of difficulty, and each can be exploited despite the layer of difficulty, right? Just as a example, again, I'm not going to spend the time to actually pick this, but if I try to do this, right, it's a lot more difficult than the other one, right? I was able to get it to spin, but very much more difficult. I can't just go ahead and do it. I have to really wiggle it around, so on and so forth. Now, I'm sure Lockpicking Lawyer and McNally there, they can go ahead and do that, no issue. But the key behind it, right, providing as many deterrents as possible. Let's go ahead and just go back to the slideshow here. But the key behind it is providing as many deterrents as possible. And no pun intended with these being locks. But if you have a more difficult to pick lock, the reality is you probably won't be going ahead and running into the likes of McNally or Lockpicking Lawyer on the frequent, and if you are, then you've probably made some really bad enemies in the past. However, the average bad actor or person, criminal that might take the opportunity, right? They probably don't have the lockpicking set. We see it all the time on videos on YouTube or anything else like that. Individuals just kick open doors, right? They don't even bother with trying to do the lockpicking. And that gets attention. They have to be very quick about it whenever they kick open a door, especially in broad daylight, because people hear it, people see it, and they can sense, hey, something is wrong. The very same, if you see somebody going like this with a lockpicking set on a lock, people are going to see that, right? And again, neither of these solutions are infallible, right? I mean, not to bash on Lockpicking Lawyer or McNally, but bolt cutters can go ahead and do the same thing. Every single lock that has a design similar to either the one on the left or the right can be broken. And that's not because of any issue with, hey, well, it's a bad design. That's just the reality of the product. So we want to go ahead and provide as many deterrents because, well, most of the time if you see somebody walking by with bolt cutters, you either know they're doing something at their house or they're going to go ahead and commit a crime. Now, one thing is, although these are very similar, they're both locks, they do have those different hardened capabilities right out of the box. Very similar to how operating systems are, and very similar to how different vendors are. So let's go ahead and move on and get back onto the idea of system hardening as opposed to just locks and lock picking, even though those are fun too. Now, one common thing that always is asked, why does it matter, right? Why should you go ahead and do this? And to some extent, one of the biggest controversies, I should say, that the information security and cybersecurity field do a very poor job about explaining is that oftentimes bad actors aren't going to attack you, right? It's not going to be as a personal individual, I should say. For very advanced attacks, right? You're likely not getting wiretapped. You're likely not having somebody spy on your computer or anything else like that. However, on the flip side, and very important as well, you are still being targeted regardless, right? Because your machine, that represents basically a zombie in their whole network. What I mean by that is that if they go ahead, a bad actor goes ahead and compromises your computer, be that an Apple device, be it a Windows device, anything else like that, they can use that for nefarious purposes. That can be launching a DDoS, a distributed denial of service. That can be selling an access to it to be able to use other malicious means. And unfortunately, if you're caught up in that, well, you can be investigated because of it. So, one key emphasis is they don't often care if you're just grandma or if you're the president or prime minister of a country for these low hanging, unsophisticated attacks. Now, again, like I said, if they're going after very sensitive data, right, grandma probably isn't going to be targeted. The prime minister and the president, absolutely. But again, you're probably going to be targeted one way or another for some reason, be it for any of those low level attacks. And as well, one of those common types of attacks, those tend to be like the default credentials. They try to go ahead and guess your password. And that's not, again, that's not somebody oftentimes sitting at the computer, but that is a program that goes ahead and runs through each of the combination. They tend to have the hardware specializations and the hardware components to enable that. But it's a program that's doing it, right? And these are, again, those unsophisticated, low hanging fruits that can be exploited and cause you to go ahead and be, well, compromised and attacked. One thing we're going to go ahead and do is talk about a case study here on the next page. Now, this one again, using the default credentials, we're going to be talking about a Raspberry Pi. So, if you've been messing with anything of Raspberry Pi, be that for streaming, be that for a Pi hole, basically putting those requests in there, or just familiar with Unix or Linux, you probably know about it. So, let's go ahead and just briefly cover this. So, again, in this case study, the research included how defaulted credentials as an entry point for an attackers were being exploited. Now, there were various types of credentials that were leveraged. Again, some of these are regular passwords, some of these are root passwords, so on and so forth. And I'm just going to slowly scroll through as we talk through it. We can see top default credentials. We can see that those are oftentimes the user and the one. We can see user and X, user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, root and root, Pi and Raspberry, and so on and so forth. Now, this was all caught on honeypot servers, which, again, cybersecurity term, they're basically put up there to catch the bad activity and see what's going on. They're not actually someone using it as their personal machine and they get compromised, right? It's to see what's happening out there. But the most common the common activity was these credentials in up to 240,000 different sessions. Now, one thing as well, many of these IPs that were associated with it, let's just scroll down here, over 5,000 of those IP addresses, which are basically your address if you have an apartment or home or anything like that. It's your physical address, except it's your computer's address, but it's not physical. That's one key thing. It's just your computer's address, how it sends the mail, so to speak. And in total, those 240,000 sessions, 54% had the intelligence suggesting they were bad actor IPs. So again, just emphasizing these default credentials are dangerous and they're so unsophisticated for attackers to exploit. Let's go ahead and return back to the slideshow here. And before we go on, the key thing I'd also mention, keep aware. Look at these news sites, right? Look at what is happening out there in the world. That's not to scare you. That's to keep you informed because, end of the day, there's likely going to be something, especially if it's an unsophisticated attack, be it like a default credential or anything like that, that you can do. Because you can change passwords. You can change all of that, right? So again, just think as we go through this series, how you can go ahead and start learning more about these new sites and so on and so forth. So let's get into the meat and potatoes about what we're going to be doing for the upcoming session here now that we've given the introduction. So for the upcoming sessions, we want to really make sure we have Oracle VirtualBox installed. One quick thing I'll do is pull that up here. All right, so let's go back to the browser, and I just have this pulled up here. So I just Googled Oracle VirtualBox download. You can click on this first one here. It's that virtualbox.org. As well, you can see oracle.com. We're just going to click on virtualbox.org. And depending on what platform you are, again, if you're a Windows-based one, so that might be your Windows 10s, your Windows 11s, if you're a Mac-based one, if you're Unix, or even if you're Solaris, you can go ahead and download VirtualBox here. Again, one key thing, always download from a trusted source. I'm just pushing over here. You can see on this lock, verified by DigiCert. In this, connection secure. We can get more information. Sorry, that popped up on a different screen. And we can see website, VirtualBox, DigiCert. If you were ever concerned, like immensely concerned, right, and wanted to do your due diligence, I would highly, highly recommend getting familiar with the site VirusTotal. It's not, again, the end-all be-all. It does not have new intelligence the moment that something pops up, right? But it's pretty good overall. So we'll do search, virtualbox.org, and we can see on here no malicious scores. This is saying all the security vendors analysis is here, and we can see the community, +1, so on and so forth. So again, make sure you're doing your due diligence wherever you're downloading anything from online. Going back to the slideshow here, so again, we'll be using Oracle VirtualBox. I really encourage going ahead and having that downloaded preemptively. We are going to be providing over .ova files, which are essentially those import into VirtualBox and be able to plug and play and go through the labs with. One key thing, this is, again, an Alphagrad based course. For all of the course elements with VirtualBox or any of the labs, again, please, 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 please do not do this. Do not do the activities we have made on the lab on your host machine. If you are going to be doing any of it, do it in VirtualBox. One other thing, Alphagrad, myself, so on and so forth, we can't take that responsibility for supporting your machine and troubleshooting VirtualBox and so on and so forth with it. Unfortunately, it's just not scalable. We all have full-time jobs. We all also have to do our other extracurriculars, be it school, family, hobbies, anything else like that. And unfortunately, we can't go ahead and support everybody's virtual boxes, especially with recorded sessions whenever this could be years down the road. That said, Google is your best friend. Oftentimes, if it gives you an error about what's happening, you can Google it, and after maybe a little bit of due diligence and research, you can go ahead and get it going. So that's really the main thing for the upcoming session, just having Oracle VirtualBox downloaded. So let's just go ahead into the follow-up here. So any of the questions or comments or observations, make sure we're leveraging the Discord channel, right? Or I'm sorry, the Discord server. Biggest thing is that we're being communicative about it. We're talking with each other. If there's, concerns about what do we do next, or I didn't really fully understand this, definitely ask it in the Alphagrad Discord. Again, the main thing behind this material is owned by Alphagrad. That's part of the main thing is this is their coursework. I'm just a presenter here, so please, please, please definitely work with them if you have any open questions or anything like that. And again, just as a precursor to anything, not anything you necessarily need to do as preemptively preparing for it, but in the upcoming session, we're going to be diving into the ideas about user accounts and applying some practical system hardening capabilities for them. So as we alluded to with those default credentials, we'll be going into a little bit more advanced and a little bit more intricate about it, and how we can go ahead and leverage that from a practical capability. So again, this has been the introduction to system hardening for beginners. My name is Forrest. I'm really appreciative of you all being here, and I'm really excited to have this course. I think it's going to be an amazing time. And yeah, please definitely don't hesitate to reach out to myself just to say hello or anything like that. Thank you all so much, and thank you. Take care. Bye bye.